David Braun in Stanmore, Middlesex, England, and this is tape number 5.
I found it very, very hard to settle down in this country. As I say, the language, I spoke not a single solitary word of English. And it is a horrible feeling when people talk to you and you want to carry on their life and you just don't understand what people are talking about. The food was strange, the climate was strange, the houses were strange, everything was like in a different world. I came to Manchester, to be precise, to Salford, and I stayed in a Zionist institution for 6 months. During these 6 months, I learned some English, and I learned a lot of Hebrew, and we learned history and geography. They were preparing us for life in Israel, really. And I had a fair amount of Hebrew, and everybody else wanted to learn Hebrew, and I insisted on speaking Hebrew, and nobody wanted to speak to me English. So it was very difficult. During the 6 months, at the end of the 6 months, I had no English at all, because everybody spoke Hebrew, or tried to speak Hebrew, and I had no opportunity to learn English, except I had the private lessons once a week. I had an English teacher, but it's very difficult once a week, 1 hour, and the rest of the time is all Hebrew. It's not easy to learn. After the 6 months period, which gave me a chance to sort of settle down and get used to things, I left the institution and I was completely and totally on my own.
It was your choice to leave?
Yeah, my period of study came to an end, and there came a new intake, and I had to leave. And then I found life very, very, very hard, because I was really like a swimmer thrown into the water and he doesn't know how to swim. I had no income, I had no livelihood, I still had no English, still everything was strange. It was very, very, very difficult. Anyway, I found myself a landlady with lodgings where I stayed in digs.
Was she Jewish?
Yes, a Jewish landlady. And there were 2 or 3 boys like myself. There were quite a few of us. There are another 2 boys who were in the same house, in board and lodgings. And I got a job in a cheder class to teach children Hebrew. So I had a very small income. But it's enough to keep me going. And I came with a visa on the understanding that I will study here. Legally, I was not supposed to work. And I had nightmares, literally nightmares, that if they find out that I was teaching, I will be deported, you know, and I'll be chucked out, and what do I do then? Where do I go? You know.
But they weren't preparing you during this first 6 months to send you to Israel?
Well, they were teaching, but the idea for me to came out here was to study. I wanted to study all the time to acquire a professional qualification of some sort. Maybe it's coming back because of the love of learning and the ambition of learning which was implanted into us. My mother always said, listen, I should acquire some profession of some sort. She deemed that I was cut out for be a professional man of some sort. So I find it very, very hard. I lived in digs, shared a room with 2 other boys who were in similar position as I am. I taught in the cheder every day for these 5 weeks. I earned a pittance, which kept me going somehow. And in the meantime, I started to study. Well, first I had to learn English, and that was no means easy. And then I enrolled to a course for matriculation, London University Maths. And my main problem was to learn English, which I found very hard. I remember I was reading physics, and I was reading chemistry, with a Hungarian dictionary on one hand and the physics textbooks on the other hand. and every second word in physics and chemistry I had to look up in the dictionary. Never mind to understand the physics or the maths. I couldn't understand the English. And the going was incredibly hard. Incredibly hard. And the problem was that I lived in a Jewish environment. I lived with a Jewish landlady. I mixed with boys who were of my own background. They also only had very little English, which was not exactly conducive to learn when you mix with people who speak Yiddish or whatever the language was. But gradually you make an effort, and it was a trying period, and it was very, very, very hard. I went to see several times my doctor, but you know, I felt so rotten. And I remember he was sympathetic. He was a Jewish doctor. He examined me and he told me, look, physically you have recovered. You need good food and a good climate, but I can't prescribe that for you, you know, in a joking way. But gradually I learned enough English, and so I made enough headway that it was very, very, very hard. It took me several years till I had enough English to present myself, which was this matriculation, to matriculate in English. Anyway, eventually I made the grade, I matriculated, which was a fantastic achievement. And my private teacher was very proud of me. It took me several years, but that was deemed to be a very good standard of education of those days when you matriculated. That was before the GCSEs came into existence. After I matriculated, I started to read for a BSc, intermediate BSc.
You were still in Manchester at that time?
Yes, I was still in Manchester. I was still. Then at what time I changed lodgings. I stayed with a German landlady, but still, she kept going on keeping lodgers, and all my fellow lodgers were boys like myself. But by that time, we acquired enough English to converse in English. And then, after matriculation, I did intermediate, which was again very hard work. I didn't have money to go to a college, so I did it privately by correspondence course. And it took me a long time. I had to have a teacher to help me with chemistry, physics.
Did you work as well? Or?
I did, because that was my only means of livelihood, to teach in the Cheder. And I made contact with my two uncles who lived here at the time, so they invited me to stay with them for a holiday or that sort of thing. They were uncles, the brothers of my mother, but I never met them before. They were total strangers to me. I knew they existed, but otherwise they were strangers. But then, of course, we got to know each other and became a member of the family. And I knew that however tenuous the links were, but I had somebody. I had somebody.
Were they nice to you?
Oh, they were exceptionally nice. But then you are self-sufficient. You've got to look after yourself. You've got to worry about who does your washing, you know, how to darn your socks, and how to cook for yourself. And you are completely and totally on your own. And you have absolutely nobody. And you get used to that way of life. You have no option. And that's the way. Anyway, eventually, after a long struggle, I got my intermediate examination. And then I wanted to go to medical school, really. That was my idea. And I applied to Manchester University for medical school. And they said to me that there was a lot of ex-servicemen there who had priority, whose education was delayed. And the universities were chock-a-block with ex-servicemen who get obviously preference. And they said they can't consider my application for at least for another 2 years. They are all full ahead. And I was late as it is. I missed my education during the war. So I didn't want to wait another 2 years. So I decided I would do pharmacy. And again, the schools were full in Manchester. I applied to the School of Pharmacy, and they said they can't take me because ex-servicemen have precedent. So I wrote to the college in Sunderland, They accepted me there and then. So I found myself in Sunderland reading pharmacy at the local school of pharmacy. And there I had the most fantastic reception by the Jewish community. There was again a single lad who got no attachment. I came from nowhere. I was taken up by the Jewish community. Incredible, the hospitality. People were fighting, come to Friday evening to dinner for us, and Saturday dinner for us. And the local rabbi, he wouldn't hear of it. Every Saturday I had to come to his house for lunch. And the hospitality was incredible. You know, people in the small towns are very hospitable. In the big towns, you are just a member, people don't know you. I remember I arrived in Sunderland early hours in the morning. The college begins at late September and October. I knew absolutely nobody in Sunderland. I knew nobody. I got off the train and I stopped somebody in the street, I remember, and I asked him, can you tell me where the synagogue is? And he told me, go this way, go that way. You got to the synagogue. And it was Sukkot morning, Chol Hamoed, in the middle of the Sukkot. I got into the synagogue. I knew nobody. I wasn't in 5 minutes in the synagogue. And somebody came, are you a Kohen or Levi? They called me up. And then the rabbi came to me, who was a very strictly Orthodox Jew, one of the old school, who sat with a shtreimel, you know, with the Polish thing. Who are you? What's your name? Listen, when you finish, you come to my house for breakfast. I said, look, I must go. No, he didn't want to know. He went to his house for breakfast, and from the first moment, now listen, you will be here for years, you are my guest, you are a survivor, I will be your family, I'll look after you, don't you worry, any problems you have. And he really meant it, and they were absolutely fantastic to me. All those years, he insisted I come every Saturday to him for lunch. And there were several other families, but I was taken up as a member of the community. And the first time in my life I felt I belong, I've got somewhere, some connection. And
did you find it hard to pick up on religion again? Or did it
no,
come back easily?
No, I did not. Because it was so part and parcel of me that I just carried on as if nothing happened. Some people came completely and totally atheist and neglected religion. And they argued, if God could allow this, then there is no God, and they didn't want to know. There are others who turned more religious than everybody else, because the fact that they survived, they saw that it was a heavenly miracle. You see, there are also, to me, I accepted it. Religion became a way of my life, part and parcel of me, full of memories. And when you brought up like that, I didn't question anything, I just carried on normally. Theological points didn't worry me. I just felt comfortable in the tradition I was brought up in, and I accept it as part and parcel up to these days. I go to the synagogue on Saturdays, on holidays, whenever I can. I brought up my children, they went to Jewish schools, and they are reasonably observant, and they carry on the same way. They belong to United Synagogues, and they're sending their children to Jewish schools. It's not for me to tell them how they bring up, but it's passed down from generation to generation. That's how it is.
What year did you qualify?
I qualified, I went to School of Pharmacy in Sunderland for 2 years, and then I had to do a postgraduate apprenticeship in pharmacy, which is part of your education, which I also did in Newcastle, and I qualified in 1956. When I qualified, there was nothing for me in Sunderland. There were no young people, and the Jewish community, lovely people, but they're all middle-aged and elderly people. So I came up to London, and I found myself a job in pharmacy, which was relatively easy, and I worked as a pharmacist for a year or two. And one day we were short of staff. The company I worked for was a small multiple company. They had 3 or 4 shops. And I was the manager of one of their branches. And one day we were short of staff. And they said, well, look, we send you staff replacement from our other shop. And they said, Valerie is a staff replacement. And that's how we met. In those days, I was the manager and she was the underling. And our roles have changed.
She's the manager.
Now she's the manageress, yes. And that's how we met. She came to work to our branch, and then we were going out for 6 months or thereabout. And then we got engaged, then got married.
What year was it when you got married?
I got married in 1960. 1960. So I qualified in 1956. I came up to London. I must have worked for 2 or 3 years, and then we met and got married in 1960.
Where did you live when you first came to London?
In Diggs.
Yeah, but
I lived in Finchley with a landlady. You see, I was so used to being on my own that when I got engaged and we got married, then for the first time ever that I had really sort of a family which you could call on my own, because I had to worry everything, my washing, my ironing, my food and my lodging. You are completely on your own. Relationship between my brother and sister is very, very close. We are very close. We phone each other, we correspond. Not only because we are brother and sister, because I know plenty brother and sisters who hardly see each other, hardly talk. But the common bond between us, the common suffering and the common experiences, a common background, creates a very strong bond between us, and we are stick together, really close ties. You know, if our generation goes, I don't think our children or grandchildren will have the same strong bond between them as we had. But it is our background or our past suffering and experiences. I don't know. But the fact is that a strong bond exists between us. Then I got married in 1960. And in 1963, my daughter was born, and I was very, very happy to have a little baby, because from nothing, with nobody, with no family, I became somebody, and that I felt then that I was fulfilled when I had the children. I adore children, and to me, I became somebody from nobody, from a young lad who came here without speaking the language, without a means of livelihood, without any family, to be totally, completely on our own, unattached. Suddenly I became somebody. I had a wife, I had a child, and I felt sort of rehabilitated. I was somebody. I stuck roots. Instead of being an eternal wanderer and homeless and faithless, I was somebody.
Where did you live when you first got married?
We got married, we bought a house in Stanmore, and the children were born there, and we lived there for 30 years in the same house. And 3 years later, my son was born in 1966, and by that time we were members of Belmont community. The community was established, and we have been very active in the community. And I was sort of fulfilled, both in that I had a family of my own, and I belonged to a community, and I wasn't a wanderer, a nobody without roots. I stuck roots, and that was an achievement in a way. If you consider yourself, if you would go to Hungary and try to settle down and to learn two language and acquire academic background and establish yourself, then you'll have an idea how difficult it must be.
But if we did that today, we wouldn't have the same hardships that you
No,
had.
you wouldn't have the same hardship because it's a different world. But it was incredibly hard to get adjusted to conditions here. I'll never forget the fact that I didn't speak the language. Life goes on around you, and you have no inkling of what's going on, and you're dying to know. You want to know. You go to pictures. You try to make sense of it. People talk to you. You don't understand what's it all about, you know. And to acquire the understanding of the language, it takes quite a long time. After a while, you begin to acquire the everyday language, but to learn the literary language and to be good at it, you know, it takes quite a long time. I remember, never forget it, when I was first year at college, and we had our end-of-term examinations. And then there was the lecturers, you know, my tutor, addressed the class and told us about our papers, you know, who did well and who didn't do well. I did reasonably well, fairly average. And then he said, and now I want to complain to you all. This was our tutor, lecturer. Your papers in chemistry and physics, some were good, some were bad, but the standard of English is appalling. You don't know how to present your subject in a proper manner. You don't know punctuation. You have no ideas of elementary English, matriculation or no matriculation. Your English is abysmal. He said that to the class as a whole. I'm not talking about the subject. I'm talking about English. The presentation, the way you present the point, is diabolical. So I felt that it was me. And I said to him, I said, look, I think it's unfair that you castigate the whole class because of my English. You know, I felt that I was the culprit. He said to me, no, in fact, your English is far the best in the class. One of them, as far as the English goes, you are quite good. You may have had a lot of trouble in acquiring English, but you learned the language and you are at least on par with anybody in the class. I thought that he was getting the whole class down on my behalf. I said, please don't do it. If you think it's I'm the culprit, just tell me and don't get the whole class down. And I was amazed when he told me that my English was, my written English was on par with anybody else's in the class, which gave me a sort of a sense of satisfaction, you know. But then I made a point to read. I lived in Manchester in those days, and I read the Manchester Guardian, which was always sort of a highbrowish paper with excellent English. So I tried to improve. I was very pleased when he told me that my English, you may have an accent and you think, but your written English, I couldn't tell the difference from anybody. In fact, it's better than most, which gave me a sort of sense of satisfaction there. And even today, what amuses me, my son and my daughter often, when they want to try something, how to put it nicely in English, they come to me. Dad, how would you put this nicely in English? Which I find very strange.
When were your grandchildren born?
My grandchildren were born, Zoe was the oldest one, she was born, she will be 9 now, and Ellen will be 5. So the family is growing up. Then my 3rd grandchild was born 6 months ago. And now we are a happy family and we've stuck roots, and that's how it is. As I say, when we got married, we bought a house in Stanmore and we worked very hard, both Valerie and I. Valerie worked in a retail chemist shop then, up till the baby was born. And when Sharon was born, she packed up work, and she was a full-time mother, like everybody else was in those days, until the children were still 6. When they went to school, then she got a part-time job. But we looked after our children always. Whenever we went on holidays, we took the children. I had no parents, as obviously nobody to look after. Valerie has got a mother, and she used to come to see the children once a week at the weekend. But we struggled the same as all the young marrieds do. By that time I was completely at home, but at the beginning it was very, very, very hard. My hardest time was, as I say, when I came to this country, and I knew nobody, and everything was so completely and totally alien, from the climate to the food to the language. It was absolutely horrible. I always have visions reading chemistry and physics with one hand the chemistry textbooks and the next one the Hungarian dictionary. Those were very, very hard times.
Do you have a message that you'd like to leave for future generations?
Well, the only message I can leave, that I hope that this will never happen in future to anybody. We hear of atrocities today in parts of the world where there people are butchered and killed in the name of whatever nationalities or the name of religion, where people are fanatics. I abhor to this day everybody who is fanatical. Fanaticism of every sort I am frightened of. I can still visualize when we hear the rantings of Hitler and people, Germans were fanatic anti-Jews. And then the communists were equally fanatics in a political sense. We have got a resurgence of Islam fanaticism. I am against every fanaticism. Any extremism of any sort horrifies me, because that's a mindless state of affairs. People don't think logically. They are carried away by emotions in the name of religion or in the name of politics. They do the most horrible things. I mean, Germany was a highly civilized country with an educated people. They had musicians and scientists and artists and all sorts. And how could they descend to such barbarity? So we must be on the guard at all times against fanaticism and leaders who can inspire fanaticism in people of any sort. This is what we have got to guard against it. And if it raises its ugly head, it should be stamped out right at the beginning and not to be allowed to come to head like they allowed to come in head into the Germany. Everybody ignored Hitler at the beginning. They said he's an upstart, a decorator, he will get nowhere. And then by the end, he was so strong, it was too late to do anything. We should stamp out every fanatic movement straight from the start, not to give it a chance to raise its ugly head. If there is any message I can pass on, this is it.
Thank you. My name is Bernice Krantz. It's March the 18th, 1996. I'm conducting an interview with David Braun in Stanmore, Middlesex, England, and it's tape number 6.
Okay, right. Let me introduce you my wife, Valerie, of 36 years standing. We have been married just for 36 years, and we are still together in the married state. It's all yours.
Can I just ask you, do you think your life would have been any different if David hadn't been a survivor? Have you seen things that you've had to help him deal with because of all that he went through?
Not really, because he doesn't really discuss it that much, unlike his brother, who discusses it a lot. It's only really when the children ask him lots and lots of questions that he really talks about it. I mean, in that respect, he doesn't, it's not something he discusses, keeps it to himself, I would say.
Yeah, but what I was referring to more was, for example, when your children were a similar age to him when he was in the labour camp, he didn't have parents of his own then? Did you see that there were times when it was different to how you thought it might be because he'd missed out on some of his youth?
Yes, because in respect of birthdays, birthdays really don't mean that much, because he didn't they never had presents or parties, whereas of course our children have. It means a lot to them. In that respect, yes, but otherwise, I don't think it has made that much difference. Maybe we give more to our children now than they ever had. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's all really.
Did you think it was sort of unnecessary to
Yeah.
have birthday parties and?
You see, birthday meant absolutely nothing to us because we were too poor to have any presents, and it was not a significant date. So birthdays and bar mitzvahs and such things like that, it doesn't mean anything to me because I wasn't brought up with it. But I appreciate that people who were born here is part and parcel of their tradition, and I appreciate it. I personally, to me, my own birthday means nothing. I know when Valerie's birthday comes, then we have got to celebrate and we've got to go to a restaurant because it's part and parcel of her culture. But to me, birthdays is not part of my culture, of
Even
my
after
heritage.
all
Even
these years?
after all this time. You see, this is what I'm trying to tell you. What you imbibe in your early childhood, the atmosphere you were brought in, the standards which were inculcated in you at your earliest childhood, they are so important. They make a lasting foundation forever and ever. I had often a dispute with people: send your children to day school, Jewish schools, or not to Jewish schools. I said the child is most receptive when they are young. You must build a foundation the way you want them to carry on. Later on, once the foundation is built, you can send them out in the world, mix with other people, learn different cultures, imbibe different values, but in the first stage you must build a safe and secure foundation the way you want them to carry on. That's why I'm a great believer in Jewish primary schools. In secondary schools, less, but the primary schools are most important because that is where you lay the foundations of the thing. In short, I appreciate that people have got different ideas and different cultures. For myself, the birthday or anniversary is not significant, but I appreciate this, that for my family it is, and I go accordingly.
No, it's just interesting to find out the
Yeah.
differences
Yeah.
that still are there, you know, even
Oh,
after this.
yes, differences. What you were brought up and what was deeply ingrained in you stays forever and ever with you. I'm not nearly as observant now as I ought to be, I was brought up to be. But I appreciate that the people who do keep it, I have a deep understanding and a deep sympathy and understanding how their mind works and what makes them tick. I understand how their mental process works and what makes them happy, and I realize my own shortcomings, that I'm not keeping not nearly as much as one ought to, but at least I know what one ought to keep, and the joy, what the observance of the holidays can mean, and what religion can mean to you, actually. I probably never mentioned it before, but the Jewish holidays, for example, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when we were children, it was a traumatic experience. We call it the days of awe. They really were days of awe. There was a palpable fear in the atmosphere. Rosh Hashanah is coming, we are called to account for all our sins. And there was such an atmosphere of fear in our little town. We used to go to early morning prayers to Slichot, and not only Jewish people, even with all the anti-Semitism, non-Jews used to come to the synagogue, and it was a palpable air of solemnity and fear that the great days are coming, and we should repent, and people should, it was really just that. And I understand it doesn't exist here. I must tell you this, which I probably have forgotten to mention. I was very involved at one time in Belmont in conducting the services, and very often I said the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim Yizkor, for people who died in the Holocaust. I used to recite the prayers from the local because the local minister asked me. And one day a congregant came up to me and asked me, why is it, David, when you say the Yizkor prayer for the Holocaust camp, people who died in the Holocaust, it sounds completely and totally different when everybody else does it. When everybody else does it, it's a dry recitation of the fact. It has no soul. It has no meat to it. When you do it, you put everything into it, and you do it with a feeling, and it sounds completely and totally different. It's a genuine, deep-felt recitation of the facts. I said, listen, don't be surprised because I was there. When I say the prayer, I can see it, my mind's eye, all the horrendous and tremendous thing what happened. How can you be not affected by it? Whereas somebody who knows nothing about it, it's just a dry recital of the litany of facts. Obviously it sounds different. But nevertheless, I was pleased that at least to the lay members of the congregation, it sounded a meaningful prayer, not really a dry recital of facts. And this is another thing which I remember from my childhood. When the Rosh Hashanah came and Yom Kippur, and we used to read the prayers in the synagogue, you read it with a feeling, because it was a days of, people lived in such abject poverty. They were so second-class citizens. They were kicked and pushed and beaten all the time. And the poor people looked forward to the world to come. There will be somebody, there we'll get our rewards. In this world, we are downtrodden and we are nobodies, but in the world to come. But it was people were religious and they believed in it. And consequently, the holidays, the joyous holidays, the Pesach and Sukkot, were a joyous occasion when families got together and everybody was happy. It was not only a dry festival, but people felt happy about it. And on the other hand, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur were solemn days, solemn, really solemn days. People used to fast and pray with great emotional and great feeling. Even today, when I go to the synagogue on Yom Kippur and some of the prayers, I feel really moved by them because, when it's described in the suffering when you read the Kol Nidre, which evokes memories of martyrdom in past ages, how people were killed for their religion. We remember in our days how people were killed in the Holocaust. For why? Because of the religion we followed. We were murdered and we were butchered and we were burned. The prayers of the Yizkor is, we pray to God for the memory of the souls who were killed, who were slaughtered, who were burned on the fire. To me, it's meaningful. I can see the fires burning, the shooting, the killing. Somebody else does the same. It means nothing to him. So I do things from my personal experience, which is completely different to somebody who, to him, is only read a prayer which is bone dry, without emotion, without any feeling.
Thank you.
Okay. This is my paternal grandfather, Shmuel Pinchas Braun, who was a shochet in our town, and he was also a member of the local Beis Din. He was a pious and very, very, very well-learned man.
Do you know when it was taken?
This must have been taken approximately in 1940. Okay? This is my mother, whose name was Gisela Freilich. This was taken when she was about 20, which must have been in 1919. That's it. This is a photograph of my father, Naftali Braun, who died at the age of 31. That's
And
it.
do you know when that was taken?
This must have been taken in 1925. Okay. This is a photograph of my mother and the 4 children playing sort of ring roses. My mother is on the photograph, myself, my twin brother and sister who survived Auschwitz, and my youngest brother, Joseph, who died of childhood illness when he was about 5.
Can you identify which one Joseph is?
With the little hat on, with the little cap on with the stripes.
And you are the tall boy?
I am the one, the taller one with the plain cap. And this is my twin sister, and next to her is my twin brother, who are both survivors of Auschwitz. This is a photograph just before the ghetto was set up. This is my mother in the middle, 3 members of our staff, and my sister on the extreme left. You could see them, the staff, wearing the yellow Star of David, which everybody who was Jewish was obliged to wear by law. This photograph was taken in about 1945, after we were liberated. In the middle is my sister, and then is her twin brother Kalman, and myself.
Which one is you?
I am on the extreme right.
And where was it taken?
This must have been taken in Budapest after the liberation, as I say, 1945. This photo was taken just after we got married on the 7th of June 1960, and there it is, the young Mr. and Mrs. Braun. This is a photograph of my daughter Sharon and my son-in-law Richard on their wedding day. They got married in 1985 in August. This is the wedding photograph of my son Simon and my daughter-in-law Osnat on their wedding day. They got married in Israel in September 1990. This is a picture of my 3 lovely granddaughters. Zoe, the oldest one, is 9. Ellen, on the other side, is 5. And the middle is my little Baba, Emily, who is just 6 months old.
And who do they belong to?
The 2 oldest girls belong to my daughter Sharon, and the baby in the middle is my son Simon's daughter. This is a photograph of the 3 surviving brothers and sisters. I'm on the extreme right, the middle is my sister, and there is my brother Kalman. This photograph must have been taken in Israel in about 1960 or thereabout. 1990 or thereabout. No, 1960s of my brain.